Welcome, everyone, to Zero Day to Every Day. This is the podcast where we unravel the latest in cybersecurity, covering vulnerabilities, exploits, and IT and security information we think that you should know. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started, we're here to make sure that security is accessible and actionable for everyone. I'm Jon Cassell, and I'm thrilled to be joined again by my esteemed colleagues, Rocco Fiore and Blaise Fello.
Thanks for having us.
Going.
Thanks for being here, guys. It's another interesting month full of freshly disclosed vulnerabilities, actively exploited issues. But before we jump into it, I did want to provide a brief on a topic that we actually highlighted last time, and this would be secure by demand. Secure by demand is a CISA initiative. And if you're not sure what CISA is, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency here in the United States. They have an initiative that shifts responsibility for product security from customers to software manufacturers by empowering organizations to demand secure products during procurement, implementation, and post-deployment. While secure by design, which I'm sure many of you have probably heard of as well, much more popular, that is, of course, keeping manufacturers secure by default. It emphasizes manufacturers' proactive steps. Secure by demand instead recognizes the pivotal role that customers play in driving change by explicitly requiring product security as part of their software purchasing process. The guidance provides organizations with questions, artifacts, evaluation strategies, as CISA puts it, to quote their statement, to assess and hold software vendors accountable for security or secure product development and maintenance. It also prioritizes product security maturity over enterprise security compliance, addressing some modern cyber threats like ransomware and software chain vulnerabilities. Um, just a few key areas around it. The focus areas include authentication, eliminating default passwords, enabling MFA by default, which all of your software vendors should be doing, eliminating vulnerability classes by systemically addressing common software flaws, SQL injection, memory unsafe code, evidence of intrusions, providing logs and security visibility for detection and response, supply chain security, which if you don't ask this question in the future, you definitely should, and that would be sharing software bill of materials or SBOMs and securing open source dependencies. And then vulnerability reporting, transparent disclosure, and coordinated testing policies. So, why should you care? Well, if you're an IT, SecOps, InfoSec, anyone that is using, of course, that software, you want to make sure that you're secure. Shifts accountabilities to the vendors by requiring, of course, product security maturity. Teams reduce reliance on costly and reactive security measures, improves resilience against ransomware and exploits because of the elimination of vulnerability classes. And again, secure defaults are really going to increase the security of your solution. Enhanced detection and incident response pretty much speaks for itself. Mitigates supply chain risks as well, because those software bill of materials and open source vetting organizations, you gain, or your buyers rather, are going to gain transparency into those third-party dependencies. Let's think about SolarWinds, Log4j. Knowing, of course, what particular dependencies are embedded within that solution would help us better assess and know what risks we're running or might be running into. Alliance procurement with security priorities, which is something, again, speaks for itself that I'm sure we'd all love, and addresses the evolving threat landscape. Of course, thinking about the future, um, rather than relying on compliance-driven endpoint enterprise security, we want those proactive security measures. So, in short, by following CISA's Secure by Demand framework and combined with Secure by Design and default guidelines too, don't of course throw those to the side. We still want to trust that, of course, our manufacturers are building their products, whether they're physical or software, SaaS products, whatever it might be, that they're default secure. All tech teams can shift from reactive security postures to, again, proactive and, as I like to put it, sustainable resilience. It's not only going to cut costs, but of course, it just protects everybody. Obviously, reputation for both the vendor as well as the buyer and end users directly can better live their lives. Any additional thoughts, you guys, on secured by demand? It's again very interesting that we, as a vendor, clearly are bringing it up here, but it is something that we do want our audience to be well aware of as well, to challenge their vendors and ask the right questions.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great topic, and it's really indicative of the overall theme of this, the growing need for third-party risk applied to software, right? We've heard of third-party risk being this kind of general compliance practice, but third-party risk specifically for software is, and I'll touch on more of this in a second in terms of some of my topics, but demanding, secure by demand, right? Demanding your third parties follow secure guidelines. And it's great that CISA outlined specifically some of these guidelines. I think some of the incidents this year, such as Snowflake, have really pushed this and been a catalyst for this need of a more specific guidelines across many industries for this need. And it's something that secure by demand, right? It's demand is the key word. I think it's so important for your customers to demand security from their vendors. So if you're a customer out there, please continue to demand security from your vendors and ask them questions about these guidelines, hold them to these guidelines. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's almost like someone's listening or keeping track of what, was specifically, I think, happening in 2024. I'm going to go over a few instances of exploitation over the last year whenever with my topics. And a lot of that will be covered in terms of what a secure by demand or some other just initiative of being secure first type of mindset would have in preventing some of these major impacts that have affected a lot of different industries and companies worldwide. And I like that there is an initiative to move forward with a security mindset to make 2025 hopefully a much better and secure year than 2024 was.
Yeah, definitely. That point again that I mentioned at the end regarding not focusing solely on just compliance. So of course, hey, you're SOC 2 Type 2. Well, ask the complementary questions too, which is why I think it'll shift between being demand, which clearly is a little bit more kind of reactive now that I got to ask my vendor for this information. Hence, going back to the term itself. And I think in the future we would expect more of this is the norm. To ask all these proper questions. So again, it's a start of some really good guidance. I'd like to see where it goes, especially for our topic from last month. With Jen Easterly stepping down very shortly, we'll see what the next year, is going to hold there. Awesome. Well, I'm going to shift this back over to you, Rocco. You have a number of topics you'd like to cover.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to stay on that topic of third-party risk because we've recently seen a number of full circle moments that it's almost scripted the way we're wrapping up the year. So you might have remembered Move It by Progress, that incident from spanning all the way back from 2021, most notably 2023, and still we're seeing the effects of it in 2024. Probably the only cybersecurity incident, actual vulnerability exploitation that could rival the effects of, CrowdStrike wasn't necessarily an exploitation, but rival that headline in terms of the ripple effects because of that. And as you know, with Move It, it was a disclosure that happened by the ransomware gang itself after the actual exploitation occurred. And we saw that recently as well with another similar file transfer program called Clio. So it's Clio vulnerability, CVE 2024-50623. It affected their Harmony, VL Trader, and Lexicon products. The flaw allowed unauthenticated attackers to upload malicious files, potentially leading to remote code execution. Not the same, but similar to the SQL injection attacks we saw with Move It. So although Clio released a patched version, subsequent reports indicated that the patch was insufficient. So this happened on December 8th, in and around December 8th, and it's attributed to the Termite ransomware gang. This Termite ransomware gang also is responsible for recent ransomware attacks involving Blue Yonder, a transportation management application that is used by many enterprise companies. So, and this affected and disrupted operations at Starbucks, leading UK grocery chains, Morrisons, Sainsbury's, having a direct impact on the transportation management function, on operations, on not just, we're not talking about the software supply chain here, we're talking about the actual supply chain, getting goods from point A to point B. So Termite, this name that is popping up more and more, is on the move. They, again, we've seen this exploitation around Clio, and I would say even more notably Blue Yonder. And this is just highlighting and bringing full circle what everything Jon said about secure by demand, third-party risk, holding your software vendors accountable here, and then also accountable to act promptly and securely in terms of issuing a patch that fixes the issue. So some of the recommendations for users using Clio apply to patches, right? But as we know, some mitigating protections around that, implement network protections. So just like Move It, where progress right after that attack said to disable HTTP and HTTPS connection to the application itself, remove it from the public internet. These are some of the same recommendations that can be made for Clio, is implementing a firewall, limiting exposure, limiting exposure to the public internet. Also, disable auto run features. So this Clio exploitation, it executes arbitrary code via embedded PowerShell command within, as well as it leverages the flaw to place malicious files in the auto run directory of Clio installations. So take care of that auto run feature, as well as continuing to, do all of your other SOC actions, monitoring, continuous monitoring around Clio, around the systems, and just be on the lookout, be more vigilant than ever if you have Clio, and especially if you have Blue Yonder. So with that being said, I'd like to pass it over to my co-hosts for your thoughts on this, your thoughts on the link between what we've seen with Move It, what we've seen with Clio, and what it means for tying it all back in secure by demand and third-party risk, what it means for third-party risk, and how customers of these vendors should be moving forward.
Be vigilant always, especially of third-party vendors. They're not internal. You can't control them. So being vigilant of what they're doing, what they're up to, what their securities and vulnerabilities might be involved with those other vendors. Keep if it in, you can control what's internal. But like I said, being vigilant, you can understand where hopefully those vulnerabilities lie and be proactive to preempt some of those issues that might occur in those types of breaches.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something obviously that anyone knew about before it, being a zero-day exploit. But continue to monitor your IOCs. The auto run thing, that was kind of interesting to me. I mean, I've been telling people to disable that for like 10 years now, or even longer,
Yeah, that's
because of just
surprising.
inputting a volume is just going to open it up. I believe it has a CIS benchmark or control to meet that it should be disabled.
When we do a product demonstration, I mean, as many of you know, our products are one of our main value adds is automated remediations. Disabling auto run is during a POC, or, working with customers, onboarding customers. It's one of the first things we work to implement if it's in their environment, right, Jon? Is to disable auto run, and we can do it at Syxsense in an automated fashion, continuously monitoring for that. So,
yeah. Easy registry change, obviously, and there's a little bit more to it beyond that, because then we talk about managed file transfer tools. Why is there not a better verification approach with the content it's pushing, ensuring that, of course, this is a secure file we want to deliver. But I mean, auto run itself is just such a silly thing that in this day and age, yes, I still see many customer environments with it still enabled, when that's something that I would definitely set, at least at the group policy level, at least formally. But this is something we don't even see controlled by most environments. So it is interesting.
So great. And I'd like to jump into now. We talked about full circle, right? From, I think I mentioned 2021 at one point, 2023, 2024. Now we're looking forward, right? So Syxsense, which we're now an absolute security company. And you'll be hearing the name absolute security much, much more. we are putting out a 2025 security forecast. And I have to say, this is one of the most intriguing forecasts that I've seen. A lot of these, basically ChatGPT at this point. I promise you, this was a very thoughtful, well built out forecast. And I'd like to give you guys a preview. So 2025 security forecast, this will be released soon. Important trends and predictions you should know about as a security leader. And it's not just as cybersecurity experts, not just focusing strictly on endpoints or patching here, right? As you see, many of the topics it's an array of topics, whether it be quantum computing, right? That's a hot topic in the news, and this is very relevant. So even within this section, we're talking about Willow, and we're touching on that and what that means for the world at large. Automation and security, it's our bread and butter, right? AI and machine learning, hot topic, been around, and it's definitely not going away. It's just artificial intelligence. If anything, it's going to be broken out to different, it's cybersecurity focused, generative AI focused, both, etc. As we see here, we touch on AI as threats, how bad actors are leveraging AI. We also touch on vulnerability exploitation, AI-driven exploits. We touch on more of what we just spoke about, ransomware and extortion, double extortion, what that means, the effects, cyber terrorism, right? Litigation, the ever-growing landscape of compliance and the legal framework around cybersecurity growing more and more prevalent. Technology trends to follow. So it's just touching on general trends, AI and machine learning, some of the adoption concerns around that, all right? Governance piece, we speak about automation and threat detection and response, automation and threat analysis, what that looks like with AI. Platform consolidation, a big topic we speak about here at Syxsense is consolidating platforms, helping customers simplify their tool stack and how to get the most out of their tool stack. Quantum computing, it's a fun one, and we've heard about it more and more. And as we talked about, Willow, right, in the news lately from Google, talking about the first time I ever heard someone say, is the multiverse real? I honestly don't even know how to unpack that, and I don't want to right now, but that sounds like a juicy topic. Energy efficient data centers, right? I'm talking about underwater nuclear centers, right? And nuclear energy, the reemergence of nuclear energy. That is a hot topic. Secure enterprise browsers. We've seen this more and more at trade shows, right? More and more successful ventures coming out with enterprise browsers launching off of the vulnerabilities around common browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, etc., that we help patch currently. So we get that. And then enterprise responses on the agenda for 2025. Zero trust architecture. It's been around for a while now, and it will only grow, especially with AI. The rise of resilience. Resilience is an important word, and don't forget it. So keep that in your mind, resilience. We will be touching on that over and over again in 2025. And then concluding. So be sure to check out the 2025 Outlook. We will have a separate webinar to be announced touching on this and diving deeper into this. This is only meant to be a taste and a preview. But I want to kick it over to my co-host. What is your favorite topic that I just pulled up? What are you guys most excited to talk about?
I would think zero trust. It's the buzzword for forever. It seems. I think that takes overall responsibility of understanding what is important in your infrastructure and understanding that there are threats that are unseen. So it's better to be proactive to prevent them before they become a problem. And I think adopting that mindset early on helps to make the world a little bit safer just by employing something like that within your environment.
Zero trust for sure. It's a big one, and one that I know from environments that I've seen is they're so far from it. Even in 2024 going into the next year, And I'm talking just the last few weeks, I've seen environments that aren't anywhere close to having that type of strategy. So I'm hoping that they attain that just like all others. But the other piece that we've had a lot more information come out recently is post-quantum. I'm probably being, focusing a little bit too much on fear here, but it is something that kind of scares me in the future at some point when, what we've been used to could completely go obsolete. So that's something that I'm personally kind of following week after week. But that's a big one to me and where that'll happen. And probably not this next year. We'll probably see some new developments, but definitely within the next 3 to 5 years, some huge developments there.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll touch on that each of those topics more at a later date, even for a webinar on that. And right now, though, I want to pass it over to Blaise. Blaise has a number of topics, kind of rounding out this year, touching on I mentioned a couple of them in Snowflake, and he's definitely going to bring up some of the healthcare related incidents that happened this year. But he just wanted to highlight and give his take on a handful of topics. So I want to hand it over to you, Blaise. Take it away.
Thanks, Rocco. I'd like to take a look back at 2024 and think about what happened, what's currently relevant, and what we can do in 2025 to be more secure. So I'd like to begin with one of the most vulnerable industries in 2024, which was healthcare. Cyber criminals targeted hospitals worldwide, commonly using phishing campaigns and network misconfigurations to deploy ransomware. The fallout, disruptions in surgeries, treatments, and administrative systems in hospitals across the US, Europe, and Asia. One of US hospitals reported over $200 million in losses from a single attack. It's a stark reminder of the importance of securing critical infrastructure. And looking back at a specific event, in March, the healthcare industry faced a major blow when Change Healthcare, a major technology company, fell victim to a ransomware attack. The Black Hat Group, also known as ALPHV or Noberus, claimed responsibility, stealing 6 terabytes of data via a vulnerable Citrix portal. The breach was facilitated by the use of stolen credentials and the absence of multi-factor authentication on a Citrix remote access service, which allowed for unauthorized access to Change Healthcare's network. This attack disrupted services for numerous healthcare providers and raised serious concerns about patient data security. Now, healthcare is an obvious public service, so when your ability to provide that service goes down, that impact will be costly. Something more recent, on December 14th, 2024, Rhode Island's RI Bridges system, which manages applications for public assistance programs, including Medicaid and food stamps, was taken offline following a cyber attack. The breach potentially compromised personal information of hundreds of thousands of users, including names, addresses, and social security numbers. State officials indicated that the attack was an extortion attempt rather than ransomware. The incident also affected HealthSource RI, the state's healthcare marketplace. Efforts are underway to restore the system before the healthcare open enrollment period ends on January 31st, 2025. In the interim, guess what they have to do? Residents are advised to go old school and use mail-in paper applications. They did establish a call center to help those affected individuals, but that can't be an easy situation for anybody involved. And as usual, the reaction is that those impacted will receive instructions on enrolling in a free credit monitoring service. So while this wasn't a ransomware attack, 2024 saw a troubling rise in ransomware attacks that didn't rely on traditional CVE-based exploits. Groups like Black Hat and Lockbit targeted misconfigured systems and weak remote desktop protocol endpoints. So industries from manufacturing to education were hit hard, with some ransomware demands exceeding over $50 million. Overall, the average ransom in 2024 being $2.73 million, an almost increase of $1 million from 2023. Ransomware costs in 2024 are projected to surpass $20 billion. So a few actionable measures you could include within your environment is harden those endpoints and restrict RDP usage, implement multi-factor authentication, and perform regular system backups. Because as we all know, cyber attacks weren't limited to healthcare. something like on February 12th, German battery manufacturer Varda AG suffered a devastating attack, first forcing a halt to production at 5 plants. The attack impacted both IT systems and production equipment. Why I'm bringing this up now is because this event disrupted supply chains globally, with ripple effects across industries relying on Varda's battery products, representing how supply chains attacks were targeted this year as more companies try to offload needs to those third parties, or in this case, relying on using external products to be used in their infrastructure. With attackers implementing malicious code in widely used open source libraries or breaching watering hole systems by gaining credentials to exploit and impact thousands of organizations downstreams, the cost of supply chain attacks, it was a staggering $3 billion globally. To combat these threats, organizations need to adopt a robust software supply chain security measures, which we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Something more recent happened in late November 2024. Krispy Kreme's online ordering system was disrupted by a cyber attack, coinciding with their annual Day of the Dozens promotion. So while physical stores remained operational, the online service disruption had material impact on business operations. So lastly, Snowflake. If you remember from our July podcast, and Rocco mentioning earlier, is a cloud data warehousing giant that faced data theft and extortion attacks. This attack emphasized the importance of securing cloud environments and educating both customers and employees on data protection. A recent development was in October when Canadian authorities arrested Alexander Connor Mocha in connection with these attacks. Mocha is accused of compromising approximately 165 companies by exploiting stolen credentials, particularly targeting Snowflake's cloud storage services. So, while 2024 has been a challenging year in cybersecurity, but it's also been a year of learning and adapting. I hope to express to everyone listening how important it is to stay vigilant and promote security-first mindset in regards to not only your own systems, but in the ever-growing third-party systems as well, because not doing so creates a hole, no matter how small, which can and will be exploited. So as we move into 2025, what are some lessons we can share with our audience based on what we've learned from 2024 and expect to continue or begin in 2025?
Well, as your last topic there, definitely spoke at length. So many are still not using MFA when we've been saying to use it for the last 8 years plus. Now, I get it with consumers. They don't want to make the shift. It's an annoyance to many who can't even remember their own password, let alone, making it unique for every new service. But in the enterprise or business world, it's definitely something that's a requirement, especially if you're relying on cloud services like your hosting or your storage rather. That's definitely something that should be used. So it's very surprising. So I guess I sound like a broken record year after year, but please use MFA. Please do a lot more as well. Focus on zero trust strategies. But I mean, it sounds so simple, and yet we're really not seeing the adoption.
Yeah, and third-party risk against, touching on Snowflake, I think you left an interesting one for last, right? And we see the next step in that where they are pledging by November 2025 now to make MFA mandatory for all accounts. So we see that secured by demand. We see the vendor not just leaving it up to their customer, right, but making it a mandatory enforcement of MFA. And whether we think that's good or not, it's probably what's going to need to happen. So I'm sure we'll continue talking about many of these topics in 2025. But yeah,
I agree with that. One of my important things is to prevent lateral movement within the systems as well. You can utilize that in a number of different ways, segmenting your network or providing or hardening your devices with secure benchmarks and frameworks so that, prevents that movement as it happens. But ultimately, sometimes it does happen. So I did want to mention as like a last point, probably a major step in securing systems came recently from CISA in their first draft of an updated National Security Incident Response Plan, which was since its release in 2016. So it's been a while since they've been able to update it. So the public comment period for that draft is open until January 15th, 2025, inviting insights from various stakeholders to refine that plan a little bit further. And so On that note, that's all I have to say today. So I'm going to kick it back to John to go over some patching and updates that we had this month.
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks again, guys. So I'll keep this part brief. As mentioned in more recent webcasts, we really just want to focus on what's been exploited, what's disclosed, not just any vulnerability out there, but we'll focus a little bit more on the higher priority ones. Patch Tuesday, I'm going to probably be saying this until the end of days. Please make sure that you are updating. Microsoft addressed 71 flaws with one actively exploited 0-day. It also solved 16 critical vulnerabilities, all of which were RCEs. The single actively exploited 0-day is a Windows common log file system driver elevation of privilege vulnerability, tracked as CVE 2024-49138. And it also has a CVSS of 7.8, making it, I would reclassify it, say, as high severity. No additional information has been released regarding how the flaw was exploited. However, since it was disclosed by the what was it, advanced research team at CrowdStrike, we'll probably see a report about its report about it rather in future about its exploitation. Adobe as well, of course, not related to Microsoft directly, but they do drop updates on the same day. They followed suit with Microsoft many years back. So anytime, again, Microsoft's dropping updates, your Adobe products will receive it too. They resolved updates across 16 separate product lines. That's a very large number. Not going to dig into any of those, but it does include your more traditional Acrobat, Reader, Photoshop, Bridge, so Experience Manager. So do make sure if you are using Adobe products to also update. Usually they're going to be always be stamped a little bit different than what you might see from NIST. Adobe does reprioritize, or rather give it a facelift with their own rating. So it usually does correlate, but also pay attention to the vendor severity. I do want to note, though, that none of them appear, at least on their website, to be actively exploited. So you should see a lower priority of 3 from Adobe. macOS did have an interesting month. No 0-days particularly. I'll probably have to double check it in just a second just to make sure I'm completely up to date, because anything can change during, of course, this webcast. But beyond Microsoft, there were a bunch of updates dropped for Apple products within the last week. On the 11th of December, Apple rolled out updates for macOS Ventura, Sonoma, and Sequoia, along with Safari for Ventura and Sonoma, as well as tvOS, watchOS, visionOS, iPad 17, and iOS and iPadOS 18. iOS 17 was not included, by the way. macOS Sequoia, the newest release, had a combined 44 vulnerabilities resolved. Hey, I like to see the numbers, but that is quite a bit. At least, of course, we're receiving updates, information is disclosed, and we're seeing the products evolve. That's a good thing, of course. So it's a bit of a bittersweet there. Sonoma and Ventura came in second and third with 26 and 23 vulnerabilities, respectively. I was also surprised in that total without really consolidating. So this is just, there are probably less numbers here, but overall, between all the product lines, there was 167 vulnerabilities. If I were to consolidate that, it might be around 100, let's say, unique vulnerabilities across all the products, but that's still a pretty big number. So it was a big release for Apple this month. Also, surprisingly, an open source, when we talk about third-party dependencies, an open source high severity vulnerability in expat XML parser also affected iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, and watchOS. So again, going back to that, know, of course, what your vendor has in the product. Moving on to the back to CISA, actually, there have been 9 exploited vulnerabilities added to the KEV so far in December. This includes active exploits in Zyxel firewalls, Project Send, Northgrid, ProSelf products. I'm just reading off the list here, obviously. CyberPerson, CyberPanel, the Microsoft Windows log file system issue mentioned earlier, Clio products, that's specifically Clio Harmony, VL Trader, and Lexicom MFT products that, again, were also mentioned earlier, as well as Adobe Cold Fusion, which we did not see get an update. Let me just double check as well, just to make sure, but I did not see anything for Cold Fusion this month. No, so we'll probably see that resolved, but that was actively exploited. I do not see that vulnerability patched yet. As well as there was another Microsoft Windows kernel mode driver untrusted pointer dereference vulnerability added on the 16th. There were no Chrome 0-days, but just my luck. Again, I just want to double check so that if if I'm able to get to it. No, as of now, no Chrome 0 days for the month, and I think there are only about 3 releases with a number of high severity issues resolved. And that's my update. Next month, we'll see, of course, Oracle's quarterly advisory drop, as well as I think a lot of manufacturers are going to move towards this quarterly model. I think Oracle had the right idea. We're as well seeing somewhat of an approach with it with Microsoft moving towards a quarterly model for hot patching. That's also something that we're seeing. And so again, we might see that line up around January, April, and July timeframes, and October as well. So yeah, I think that's it. I'm sure you heard the list. You're used to it, of course. Nothing surprising there. The same manufacturers, same players. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope this episode has been both informative and useful. I always want to mention that the Syxsense team identifies, classifies, pre-checks various patches and vulnerabilities that affect common endpoints and servers. Of course, all the content that we supply to our customer base. If you'd like to get a full listing of all the issues that may impact your environment, visit our website at syxsense.com. Under resources, you will find a link to our vulnerability database, where again, we don't just discuss the level of impact like everyone else, but we do provide recommendations and remediations for many. Additionally, I again want to highlight our parent company, Absolute, leader in endpoint resilience. Combined, our unique platform provides self-healing endpoint security along with proactive patch and vulnerability solutions, ensuring that mission-critical applications do remain operational even after an attack. If you have any further questions, concerns, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below or by contacting a team member. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you like today's content and stay updated with us, the Syxsense and Absolute team.